when you bring in your designers, you bring in creative writers and put it together and say, like, okay, you think through, like, what are your creative directions that you can go in? But then bringing it to life is making sure that it truly is mapping back to what you set out to do and what your criteria is and what that positioning platform is.
Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we unpack the messy, beautiful intersection of creativity and business with the artists, marketers, and founders shaping our culture. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made, and I'm the host of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include John Kane, founder of Optic Nerve and pioneer of the MTV visual revolution. Robin Sloan Seibert, VP of Music Video at Elektra and the creative force behind iconic imaging for Tracy Chapman, Counting Crows, Weezer, all sorts of amazing brands there. Brandy Grace Wong, founder of Totally Branded, a brand strategy and business efficiency firm helping creative founders build with clarity and intention. I'm forever grateful for the supporters of our podcast, and we are always open to more sponsors that align with our creativity. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a creative studio that produces entertainment quality animation and illustration for brands that want to stand out in gaming, entertainment, and pop culture. We help companies tell stories that resonate with imaginative audiences and turn viewers into fandom. Whether your brand needs creative strategy, an exciting trailer, a fully animated series, or some engaging motion graphics, we got you covered. Visit epicmade.net and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign. All right, so with us today, we have Veronica Kido. Welcome to the show, Veronica.
Thank you so much. I'm psyched to be here.
Psyched to have you. All right, so for those of you that don't know Veronica is an award-winning publicist and writer who began her career as a journalist and now serves as president of Kido Communications, a boutique PR firm that helps leaders get noticed, achieve PR results they never thought possible. Her work has earned her top-tier media coverage for her clients and Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan Management Review, CNBC, Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal, a few publications everyone has heard of, obviously. So today we're going to be talking about the art of strategic brand positioning and how visual design brings that strategy to life, including work we've done together and what it really takes to build a brand that the media can't ignore. All right, that was a pretty impressive background there. So you've definitely done some cool things in the space. And as I mentioned, we've collaborated before. So happy to have you on the show and just kind of talk through some strategic branding and positioning.
Yeah, that sounds great. And, one of the things that I think is interesting to talk about, just given both of our businesses, is the art aspect of strategic brand messaging and positioning. And what does that mean? And I work in business to business marketing, and I work with a lot of professional services firms. So I think when people think about that, like, what does that mean? How does art relate to a tech consulting company or a sales training company? What does that mean? And I thought we could just have like a really interesting conversation about how art parlays through what I'm doing and then through the work that Epic does is really interesting.
I love
So
that.
that's okay, cool.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'll just start off with, because I know when people talk about strategic brand messaging and positioning, it can mean different things. So when I talk about it, I mean, for a company, what's that unique value that they're creating for their customers? And the strategic positioning platform, when I'm working on an engagement like that, is really a very short, succinct statement on how a company, like, what do you do? How is it different? And why does it matter? I always answer that question of like, right, like, why does that matter to one of your customers? And I always look at it too as it's really a lens for management to use for decision making. So coming up with the what you do, how you do it, and why it matters factors through everything that you do in leadership and everything for your employees to understand about what you do so they can make decisions as well. And you can empower your employees to make decisions. So, for instance, let's just say you are a small company, but you know you want to be growing and you're thinking about either mergers or acquisitions. That's a great management reference and lens to look through to say, like, does this company fit with our strategic brand? And is it a company that makes sense for us to merge with or a company that makes sense to acquire? And it's just not a tagline. It's not like copy for external use that you're like, I'm going to just lift this and put it right on my website or put it on social media. And it's not a word for word message to employees. So I hope that kind of gives a definition of when I say strategic brand positioning and messaging, what I'm talking about. And, you do have your architecture of, what is the message and then what are your proof points underneath it to validate it and help it come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that gives a lot of clarity, and it's absolutely an important part of, and I think why we connected so well when we did finally, do some work together, which was fun. It's that we have this belief here at Epic Made as well that, like, we can make things beautiful and pretty, and that's wonderful. But if there's not strategy underneath of it, and it doesn't start with some foundational direction and pillars of communication and what you're trying to actually convey, like, it's really just beautiful noise. So you really have to have that underpinning of exactly, who are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? All the things that we just talked about, like, and make sure that there's some very clear direction, because otherwise you sort of just throwing stuff out there, and it's just like opinions of like, oh, well, this looks good or this feels good or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily move the needle. Design is not just art, right? Like, these are design things. There has to be intention and understanding and direction and utility in it, right? And that's the big differentiator for me when I talk about art and creativity versus design, right? It includes art and creativity, but it really has that utility, that strategy, that, like, we have a goal here we're trying to accomplish.
I love that. And I think this is one of the reasons why we worked so well together. So we'll probably talk about the consulting company that we worked on together. Was fresh coming off of their strategic brand positioning and messaging initiative, and then we were bringing the brand to life. And that's when we reached out to you for some help with some videos to help with a brand launch campaign. And one of the things that made me feel really good is that, sometimes for our clients, it can be a lot to take in. And you're like, oh, do you really need all these steps? And, at the end of the day, I'm getting this short, succinct statement about, what we do and how we do it differently. But part of the process, and I think how it makes sense at the end of the day, is we do this like mapping exercise. So if you think of like three concentric circles, it's like we look at what are the company's offerings and what are their strengths and weaknesses with it. What are the needs in the market? Like, for your prospective customers, what do they need? What are their problems and what can you solve for them? And then the other circle is the competition and looking at how are they marketing themselves? What's their core positioning platform? What are their core messages? And finding that white space in the middle of those three concentric circles to really bring things to life. And then that ends up being your brand position. So we're looking at all those factors of who is your target audience exactly. And we interview them throughout the process, as well as looking at the competition, as well as looking really in depth at what the company has to offer. And one of the things I work with Doug Fox, who is a brand strategist, brand guru. So I always like to acknowledge him. He has this part of validation testing for brands. And we now use this when we work with a company, and it is the most powerful thing that we can do. And what I love about it is that it takes something that could be very subjective and makes it very objective. So when you're presenting back research and data to a leadership team about their brand, it stops the conversation from being about, oh, all these anecdotal bits of stories that come out like, oh, last week I was talking to so and so, or this happened. It's like, look, we just tested this with X number of people who are all potentially prospective customers of yours. And this is what they had to say. Everyone was asked the same series of questions, and it stops people from drinking the company champagne
Mm.
because just I feel like I run into that so much. So the power of validation stops all of that. And it's really a beautiful thing. And, when Doug and I work on these projects together, combined, it's like 40 years of experience for us. And every single like business to business project we work on and we go through the validation testing, no matter what we might be thinking heading into it, we always learn something different because you're actually talking to potential customers and getting their direct feedback on different brand positioning concepts.
And that's science, right? You go into it with a proposed hypothesis. We believe this. We're going to control some variables and create this one sheet with these very specific questions. And then we're going to test it. And then you get the facts, right? And
Exactly.
I
Research, fact, data.
100%. And I love that process, right? Because, no matter what side of this coin you're on in terms of like doing a service-based company, we do the visual side, you do a lot of, positioning strategy, all that. There's always at some point, if you don't do this, and I had to learn this the hard way, you get at some point in the process and they're like, well, I showed this to my kids, my friends, my kid's best friend who just graduated with a design degree from blah, blah, blah. And they think this would look better in purple. And we're just like, and you try to like respectfully tell them that that's irrelevant, or like, what, like, we have a process that we've designed and we know what we're doing and we've done this and you hired us because we're the, and it just
Uh-huh.
gets really muddy and you try not to be condescending or disrespectful. And like, it's just very frustrating, but doing it that way and having this like objective data that isn't subjective. There's no opinions in here. This is like, these are the facts of what we've seen, hugely powerful and helps steer and avoid a lot of that headache.
Oh, it's so funny that you say that, Carl, because I can't even tell you how many times during client engagement, someone will say, like, exactly what you said. I showed this to my wife, or I showed this to my husband, or my neighbor is a designer, my neighbor works in marketing, and this is what they said. I'm like, well, did they map the market? Did they study your competition? Did they talk to your customers? Did they look at your offerings? And also through the validation and figuring out what your prospective customers want, taking that information and synthesizing it. And then once you have your positioning concept, so let's just take this case that we were working on together was superior values. Okay, very different in the market. Yeah, sure, lots of companies have their core values written on their website or hanging up on plaques in their office. But this was a company that truly was like living it day to day. Everyone we talked to internally at the company and their clients were saying it. And it's almost like, is this for real? Because it doesn't happen very often. It was like unbelievably refreshing and so different. And then when we tested it with prospective customers through the validation process, they loved it, right? And so much of great branding is about how can you connect emotionally with prospective clients? And then how do you translate that or convert that rationally so your prospect becomes a client? And with that particular positioning, I mean, that really hit home with prospective customers because they were like, I wish that I knew a consulting company like that because if their values map with my values, and they just went on and on and on. But it definitely did strike a chord with every person we talked to through the validation process. And it was really, really amazing. And I think just a great example of how you can connect emotionally and then convert
Yeah.
rationally. And the other bit of that is then once you have that messaging and you're looking at, okay, now how are we going to translate this, these words into art and design to bring the brand to life? Through the validation testing, we're gathering information about what are and through the whole process, really, the three concentric circles, you know, what is the personality of this company? And we're testing that with the prospective customers about what are the things that really stand out to them. And then you have core terms that you're looking at. And then how do you translate that objectively into, say, colors? So it's not just like, you know what, my wife really likes purple
Yeah.
or blue or whatever it is. But I just went back actually before we started talking, and I was like thinking about this and looking at the creative brief that your team had sent over to me before we engaged in production work. And I was like, I loved the questions because it was asking about voice characteristics, emotional takeaways, what's the visual and creative direction. And because of the process we went through, we had all of that information and we could actually explain and say, okay, the colors were um, blue and purple because that translated to trust and innovation. Everything was research backed and we had data to connect things. And I just can't say it enough how much I love having that research backed objective information to make choices.
Well, it really does help you just navigate the whole way through, right? And it's we enjoyed having that. Rarely do we bring on a client where they have all of this wonderful data and information and positioning already lined up, so we can just really go, okay, let's debrief on that. Got it. All right, now here's our ideas that align perfectly with this. Well, and then go from there and make the most successful thing. So
Yeah, because
that was
otherwise,
fun.
right? It's like almost like you're put in the position of having to try to like on the fly figure these things out. So your end product can map with the brand and the brand experience for customers and prospects. But without having gone through that process, it's a bit of like, which way is the wind blowing?
It is a bit like that, and with enough experience and enough of the right people in the room, you can generally get a good direction. But it's still going to be, it's still more work, obviously, and it's not backed by like empirical data. Like we actually did the research, right? It's just like we've got a gut feeling, which look, entrepreneurs are so accustomed to going with the gut feeling, right? But the bigger you scale and the more is at risk and the less nimble your organization is, the more important it is to really do the research and get the details of what direction you're about to take things, because the implications are bigger and affects more people's lives, and it's a lot harder to move a giant organization around and pivot different aspects of things. So it's really dependent hugely on like the client size and what that sort of operational looks like, operational logistics looks like. So yeah, I love that. So you also have a lot of experience in journalism and PR over the years. So I had some one-off questions for you, if you don't mind.
No, bring it on.
What do most brands misunderstand about how media really works? Like, what's the big thing that you see there that's like this thing that you see that's just definitely a gap in their understanding?
I think a lot of people just don't understand. They see these like stories come out and they're like, "Well, that came out or this came out." And I think they think it's like, "Oh, you hire a publicist and they're going to pick up the phone and have like a 10-second conversation with someone and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, ta-da, in this publication." And it doesn't happen like that, right? Since I've been in the business, I mean, the model has changed quite drastically, right? Like there was no online. I hate to admit that when I first started. Advertising models have shifted drastically. The number of staff, I mean, and now it's like not only are you responsible for writing your article, but everyone has to be on social media. You're blogging about it. You're on LinkedIn or Instagram. There's like, or you're having a video about it. There's like so many other elements to the job of being a journalist nowadays. And
Yeah,
they're bombarded with pitches from people like me.
every day, all
So
day. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that could be their entire job if they let it, just looking at the emails of all the pitches coming in. So for them, I always offer, and so I started my career as a journalist. Um, I worked at a couple of television stations and then I worked at a newspaper. So I feel like part of the value that I can bring to my clients is helping them understand like what elements of a story do we need before we even think about contacting a journalist because I'd never want to waste anybody's time. So,
Yeah.
what do you have that's new, that's timely, that is actually newsworthy? Just because you put a lot of time and effort into doing something doesn't mean it's newsworthy. So, do you have new research to back that up? What's your compelling point of view that's different than what everyone else is saying? And why should they believe you? Like, what makes you a credible source of information? So there's a lot of behind the scenes that has to take place before, I would even attempt to contact a journalist and make sure it's something worthwhile that they would be interested in.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And from what I know about PR, and my wife does a lot of successful PR in her world, mostly in like sustainability, environmental justice, that kind of stuff. But it's really like the relationships, right? Like the deep the connections you have with other people, and that journalist has with all these different sources of information within their niche, and they know and trust them and know, hey, look, something comes through from my wife to one of her points of contact, they're going to open that email and they know that she's already done her homework. They like
Yes.
that, and it's definitely timely and newsworthy. She's definitely trustworthy. So like all those things, and she's never asking for favor. It's never about her, right? Like it really has to make sense, right? About like what's going on. Like this is actually something that should be reported. And I think what I've seen, and every time I tried to do it before I got in the know of this, is just like, yeah, I'm doing this cool thing. Isn't it cool? Like everyone should think this is cool. And so like, there's nothing really there, right? It's just you clearly trying to self promote. And that isn't something anyone's going to pick up. It doesn't do anyone any favors other than you. So it really has to be something valid that the end publication would actually want their viewers to read and their viewers would find valuable. So
A
that's sort of
hundred.
the framing.
Yeah, 100%. And completely agree with you that relationships matter and still getting together with people in person
Yeah.
matters. And, once you have a solid relationship and you've made that great connection, for me as a publicist with a reporter, then just like your story with your wife, and you go back to the well, they're familiar with you. They know that your quality, you're going to provide them with something that's useful for their readers or for their listeners, which is really important. But I also tell my clients that at the same time, there's going to be people that they want to connect with that I might not have ever spoken with before.
Yeah.
Can I reach can I reach them? Yes. But you have to have something, like I said, newsworthy, timely to say and to talk about. And I think there's some great new services out there that PR people use that are, use AI, it's automated, and really it's like matchmaking for
Yeah.
reporters to list their queries. Like, I'm working on this story right now. I need to talk to a data architect, or I need to talk to a CEO of a certain type of company, and these are the questions that I have. And so a lot of that just takes place now, like through these platforms. So you're
Yep.
not getting on the phone and talking to anyone, but it's like your written response back to their query either makes it in the story or it doesn't. And
It's
but
interesting.
again, once you have a success and a match, then it's much easier to go back the next time. And they know who
100%.
your clients are and the value that they can offer.
That makes a lot of sense. So, obviously the strategy on the outreach and the strategy of positioning that is important in every detail in business, right? Like, and we just reaffirm that even with putting out a press release versus doing brand positioning versus all of that. So, like how does brand positioning and visual design come together and really affect credibility? Like, how have you seen that, and what things do you think are important in that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, bringing a brand to life takes a lot of work, as you know, and it's when I think about that, where you end with your positioning platform and your messaging architecture and then bringing it to life is it's such a fun process. I love the creative aspect of it and bringing different skill sets to the table to collaborate and make it happen. So I think when you bring in your designers, you bring in or you keep with the positioning and messaging experts, you bring in creative writers and put it together and say like, okay, you think through like, what are your creative directions that you can go in? And again, still using the same research backed data that you have to work with, but then bringing it to life is making sure that it truly is mapping back to what you set out to do and what your criteria is and what that positioning platform is. Um, and we always talk about what's that one sharp nail that's your message, right? Our goal when we start these positioning projects is figuring out what is that one sharp nail that addresses a prioritized audience's wants and needs. And it is the one nail that's going to penetrate effectively through the market and penetrate efficiently. And I'm going to give credit to Doug Fox again. He has this awesome visual that I love of like a big old fashioned phone book. And he has initially a bed of nails going across it. And it's showing that if you don't have your single sharp nail messaging, but you have like, I don't know, say 5 or more messages that you're trying to get out to market and you're trying to penetrate that phone book, it just skims the surface. Like it can't penetrate. But if you
Yeah.
have that one sharp nail, whoop, it goes right through and it is very effective and it is very efficient. So I think that's another thing when bringing the brand to life is carrying that sharp nail. And when things start, because people like to add on, like, oh, what if we also did this? Or what if we also
Mm,
said this? Or what if we also added, I don't know, these other creative or, art design elements? The message gets diluted. And again, you're
it
just back
does.
to skimming the surface and you're not penetrating the market. So I think that's the hat that I wear when I go through circle because I'm not a artist, I'm not a graphic designer. So I kind of carry that and help guide the other people that I'm collaborating with to make sure we're staying true to that sharp nail messaging.
I really love that. I took a similar approach with my business when I rebranded and sort of restructured back in 2016. I realized we were trying to do a little bit of everything for everybody, and there was no like real pillar for us to grow on. Like I was wondering why I was stuck in like doing very small projects, a lot of mom and pop stuff, and that's fine and that can work great. But I was trying to build a business with multiple people and do something bigger with bigger budgets because we have bigger ideas about like the level of things that we could execute. So we really decided like, well, what's the one thing that we're absolutely sure we're incredible with, and
Well, I'm applauding you for figuring that out
oh,
because it's
thank
hard
you.
to do.
It is, and for us, it landed on that animation 2D, video work, right? And then we were able to go to the very top of the market with them. We've done stuff with like some of the biggest brands in the world, and like got to work on like SpongeBob and Ninja Turtles and like really cool stuff that
So
we
fun.
love to see our whole life, which has been exciting. We just did a Lord of the Rings project, which like, oh my God, like
Wow.
that's my favorite
Impressive.
franchise in the entire world. For sure. So that was a bucket list project, which was cool. But yeah. So once we figured that out, we were able to really build the business, get on another level, do some things, get to where we're at now, and then we have the resources now to add in other legs that are equally powerful, but we're already established in this one space. But trying to establish them all at once, we just didn't have the resources and the power to do that, right? You have to put that
Right.
amount of energy into every piece, I feel like. So I love that analogy on the PR side too, and it does just kind of translate as I've seen through all the different parts of business. So that's
Yeah. And
awesome to see.
just like you have your one sharp nail and that's what you're going to market with, it doesn't mean that you don't offer and can't help your clients with other services. But
Yep.
you need to focus your messaging, right? And focus on core services that map and align with that messaging. So I always tell them that too. There's a difference between marketing and sales. And
Yes.
once you're noticed because of your sharp nail messaging and you're in conversations with a prospective client, if they have other needs and you have services and solutions to help them with that, well, that's fantastic. But you're not going to go to market with, your 20 different things that you could possibly help somebody with.
No. Yeah. Amazon didn't go to market with we got everything for you here tomorrow. No, they went to market with you can buy your books from us and we'll do
That's
it better
right.
than anybody. And then once that was like, bam, that is a full on, very bona fide lane of business. Then they just layered it in. And now every time they go into a lane of business, they go, all right, how do we be top 3 in that sector? Like, how do we add our own entire shipping company? How do we have top 3 streaming platform, top 3
That's
music
right.
platform? And they just keep crushing it. And, that makes sense. And they're doing it. And now it's like it's hard for them to even fail at anything if they just operationally. And that's, that's what Bezos is like his real genius, right? Is operations and getting this and then bringing in the people to make that come together. But anyways, I digress a bit there. So, when you get people coverage, what's the difference between you've got somebody, they've got some coverage and like, they got, an article somewhere or somebody featured them in this thing, and the difference between that and building real brand authority in a space?
So what's the difference? I just want to make sure I understand your question. What's the difference between like a single article coming out mentioning your company
More or
versus
less, like, yeah, what does it take to go from like, hey, I'm getting some coverage in the space and like, this, that, whatever, and like becoming this like bona fide authority in the space, right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
you can get a couple articles and be featured here and there, but like, when is it really like, oh, people are looking at you now for this type of information? You're a leader, a voice in this space.
Yeah. It really is a surround sound effect. Meaning you have to look at your whole marketing communication mix, right? So I would never say to someone like only go after, you know, media. And even to get the media's attention, let's just say I'm representing you, Carl. And we're like, you know what? It would be awesome if you got into such and such news outlet. And I reach out to that reporter. They've never heard of you before. Where's the first place they're going to go? LinkedIn.
Yep.
So what's your presence on LinkedIn? What are, one, is your profile fully optimized? What are you saying? Are you contributing on a regular basis? That starts building your credibility,
Mm,
right? And your authority as a key subject matter expert right there. And then I think most naturally is like they'll go from LinkedIn, then they'll go look at your website, or they'll go look at another social channel, like depending on what your business is. Like maybe they're looking at YouTube. If I'm reaching out to a podcast, they want to see, how do you present on video? Are
mm.
you articulate? Are you
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
what are you super scripted? Or can you have a regular conversation and handle questions on the fly? So there's a lot of different aspects to that. So I think when it comes to building your credibility and building your authority, one, obviously you do have to be the subject matter expert on that topic, whatever
Yeah.
that is. Two, you need to prove it. Lots of times you need to have research behind it. So it's not just, Veronica's interesting point of view on whatever topic, but you
Yeah.
have research to back it up. And then you're sharing and communicating that information in an engaging way on social platforms, on your website. And it takes that for a journalist to even want to talk to you. And then you're included in their article, which then kind of loops back to social media, right? Because then you
Sure.
can share that article out there. You can, and people see, okay, they worked with such and such reporter at such and such, news outlet. And it all really ties together. But it's also producing a lot of your own content along the way to
Yeah.
showcase your authority and subject matter expertise on a certain topic.
Absolutely. I could totally see that. And, that's LinkedIn is a huge platform. I think for social validation in the business space, right? Like it's almost impossible unless you're like I guess an old hat, famous, successful at a thing, right? Like you really have to be on LinkedIn. You really have to be active. You really have to be creating content and posting on there and interacting. And so I definitely have seen that myself. And part of why I do this podcast is to have some wonderful content to continue to post on LinkedIn. So um,
Yeah, and a lot of the people that I work with too, like one of the projects I'm just wrapping up right now is working with this amazing leadership and change communication expert who just wrote his sixth book.
ooh,
So that's another way, right, of establishing your credibility and your thought leadership, and then having research that's in your book and your practical experience for whatever 20, 30 years working with clients and helping them, that all comes together to really form the your platform and your foundation for going out to
man,
the world, and why you should be considered a credible source for a news organization.
I just had a great idea because you said that. Amazing. Yeah, so I like a few people have reached out to me over the years, but like, oh, you should write a book. We should talk about this. And like they're trying to sell me a book writing service, right? But it's like, I also have this other tool that I record all my calls in just for note taking purposes, but they have like a feature in it now where you can analyze all your calls. And I had it the other day, analyze all my calls to give me like four great talks I could do based on all my talks, all the conversations I've had over 4 years. And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. And then when you were saying that, I was like, oh, I'm going to ask it to like, what should I write a book on based on everything that, because I don't even know like what I should wrap my head around on that. So, anyways, that'll be fun. I'm gonna write a book. I'll let you know, Veronica. We'll we'll promote it together. It'll be
Yeah,
fun.
I've done a talk with that as well. And a lot of people will say that to people. You should write a book.
Yeah.
And the whole topic was, well, should you write a book?
Ooh.
And getting into what's involved and what are people's expectations, because I think a lot of authors, brand new authors, think like, oh, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to make so much money, I'm going to sell so many copies, and that's not the that's
No,
not the case. It truly is a labor of love. It's a long, lengthy process. So if you are going
for
to write
sure.
that book, we should talk offline.
I think if I did, it would be about just like scrappy entrepreneurship and like, should you be an entrepreneur? And if so, like, what does that look like, and how should you frame that? And like, what does success look like? And the journey I've been through, because I started my company at 20 years old with like big dreams and big egos and big ideas about like what it would look like when I'm 41 now, and falling off of that pedestal onto my face, being, hitting 40 was an interesting journey too. But like, reframing it all and looking at all of it as like this like life that I built intentionally and grew has been fun and exciting, and having some of the things that I learned along the way that have allowed me to survive recessions and economic near collapses and COVID and all kinds of the crazy
Yes.
things that happens over 20 years of your life, both in the market sector and private personal things and all the things. And it's yeah, I think there might be something there worth sharing with the world. But anyways, so um so I'm curious. So you've been doing Kido Communications for a while. Sorry, I just said that wrong. Kido Communications. What's on the horizon for you? What is the next steps? Was there any cool things you're working on, or is there like a big goal you're trying to hit, or some dreams and achievements there?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that makes me really happy these days is, there's been so much talk of like, I write, I do media relations, other public relations programs, helping clients, speak at industry conferences or getting onto webinars, social media strategy. Um, and I think one of the things people have said to me once AI entered the picture was like, do you think you're going to be out of a job? Are you're not, everyone can just use ChatGPT or Claude, and they can write things, and you know people always could write. AI, in my opinion, is a tool that can help us. I don't think it's going to replace mankind, and no one's going to have any jobs to do. It's just like, when websites first started becoming popular, or any technology that takes off and then is like mainstream, there's always that initial panic of like, oh, no one's going to have a job anymore, or
Right.
robotic automation. like, oh, that's taking away all the jobs. Jobs shift,
Yep.
knowledge shifts. And so many people kept saying things to me like, press releases are dead. No one's going to want earned media coverage anymore. And now, with thanks to AI, when you go, people would always go to Google or Yahoo or, whatever to search whatever
Yeah.
they were looking for. Well, now you just enter that into an AI engine, right? So
Yep.
you're a chat GPT or whatever. So the number one way that AI engines get their information is from press releases and from earned media articles.
Who would have thought? Authority voices in the space where they scrape the internet.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is where the information is coming from. So to
Hmm.
have that AI engine visibility, it's really important for companies to do PR.
Yeah. 100%.
And so,
Yeah.
I'm looking at hunkering down there, and continuing with the writing that I do for my clients, whether it's blogs, byline articles, white papers. Um, I love that work. I find it really interesting. And I also find that in working with the media, that's not going to go away either. And most recently, this book campaign that I was on, it was really great to get some feedback from podcast hosts and from some journalists that there's so much like spray and pray that goes on, meaning you're just taking the
Yeah.
same message and you're just blasting it out to everybody. I think that's a recipe for disaster. And it makes me so angry when I know that people do that because what service are you really providing? I think it's so important that you're just as you would before you got on a phone call with a prospective customer. Before I reach out to a journalist, I'm researching them. I'm looking at them on LinkedIn. I'm looking at them on their news organization's website. I'm looking and reading like what stories have they written recently, like what's top of mind for them, and making sure that what I have is even going to match with what they're interested in talking about with their readers or their listeners. And if I'm sending them a book or some material, like who has time to just sit down and read like a whole thick book? You're not going to do that in one
Yeah.
afternoon when you have 25 other things you need to accomplish that day. So just simple things like flagging off, if you're interested in empathy, here's a whole chapter on empathy. Read these 15 pages. These are the most important
Oh,
things to look at before you get on the phone. Just some white glove service. Whereas like I know the book like the back of my hand because I've been working on it for months, but just, FedExing it to somebody so they can take a look at it. It's just pointing that out. And I always say that to my clients that obviously I'm giving them white glove service, right? They're paying me, they're my priority. But I look at it as I have two clients. I have a client that pays me, and I have the media, or,
yeah.
it's a conference producer, etc. Um, because without them, I wouldn't have my paying clients, and I need to give them the same white glove service that I give my clients to make their jobs easier because I know from having been in some of those positions myself before what their job entails and how busy you are and anything you can do to make someone else's life a little bit easier and simpler, I think goes a long way.
Look at that. Always layering in strategy before you're doing any work. Makes
You
everything
have
better.
to.
You have to. Otherwise, you're just a part of the noise, right? So
That's
like
right.
that's the real secret sauce there is like getting in there, doing some research, understanding the most effective way to take whatever approach you're going on. So I love that. The constant strategist. Um, well, it looks like we are coming up on time already here, Veronica.
Well,
This
that
went
was
really
fast.
fast, super fast. So before we wrap, I do have one last question for you. Is there anyone or anything in your career you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe a mentor, valuable resource, or a favorite client?
Yeah, that's a good question and a tricky one. So you never want to hurt anyone's
Of
feelings by
course.
not mentioning them. But I think just based on our conversation today, I kind of already did give a shout out. And when I work on these strategic brand messaging and positioning projects, I always love to work with Doug Fox. So go check out Doug Fox on LinkedIn. He is a brand guru, and we've worked together for decades. And I think he's a good, credible authority on brand strategy, brand positioning. So I'd recommend checking him out.
Love that. Love that. Well, we will definitely see if we can get a link to him in the show notes. And a big thank you. I think the LinkedIn is where we met, right? Didn't we networking on LinkedIn? I believe. I'm trying to remember where we got connected in the first place.
I think we actually, you know what? This is an interesting story. It was one of your salespeople cold emailed me.
Okay. Yeah. I recall. That's right.
And then I had a conversation with the salesperson, and that's how I got to know about your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you and I, then a project came along.
Yep.
So you know what? There you go. Cold calling, cold emailing still works.
It still works for sure. All right. Well, thank you, Veronica. So if people want to, you can check out Veronica's website at Kido Communication. Kido, I keep saying that wrong. I'm sorry. KidoCommunications.com. That's KIDO. COMMUNICATIONS.com. But if listeners would like to follow up with you directly, is there a better place for them to go?
If they do go there, they'll see my email, but you can always find me on LinkedIn, Veronica Kido, Kido, and you can email me at V for Veronica, and then Kido, Kido, at KidoCommunications.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we will see you all next time. Take it easy.
Sounds great, Carl. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Take care.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.